When Yaman finally opened up in that interview, it wasn't just another press moment, it was the kind of raw confession that left everyone silent. His voice shook as he tried to put his feelings into words, but what came out was so powerful that fans still can't stop talking about it. "When I heard her voice again," he began, pausing as if the memories physically weighed on him, "I completely broke down. It was like the past rushing back all at once. I couldn't stop it, I couldn't control it. It just destroyed me." These words were not part of a rehearsed answer, not the charming lines of a leading man promoting a project. This was the vulnerable, unguarded truth of someone who had carried a deep wound for years. Fans knew immediately who he was talking about. For so long, the speculation had been endless. Was his connection with Demet Özdemir real, or was it just the magic of the camera on set? Now, in this emotional confession, Can gave the clearest signal yet that what happened between them went far beyond fiction. You could see it in his eyes. This wasn't about a role, it was about a love that had left scars. The moment was unforgettable. For years, Ken had been the image of strength, confident, charismatic, larger than life. But in that chair, under the studio lights, he wasn't the untouchable star anymore. He was simply a man reliving the sound of a voice that once meant everything. Fans online exploded with reactions. Some said they had tears in their eyes just listening. Others admitted they had always felt the truth was hiding beneath the surface, and this confession proved them right. "It's not just nostalgia," Ken continued, struggling to hold his composure. "Her voice was tied to every dream I once had, every night I stayed awake thinking about what could have been. Hearing it again, it opened a door I thought I had locked forever." The silence in the room spoke louder than any question the interviewer could have asked. The interviewer leaned forward, clearly sensing that something deeper was about to come out. For a moment, Ken didn't speak. He just looked down, almost as if he was trying to gather the strength to continue. And then, with a trembling smile that quickly faded, he said, "People always think time heals everything. But the truth is, some voices, some memories, they never leave you. They stay hidden, waiting for the right moment to come back and break you all over again." Those words cut through the room. It was no longer about gossip or speculation, it was about a man confronting his own heart in front of the world. And fans couldn't believe they were finally witnessing it. For years, both Can and Demet had been silent about their personal bond. They laughed off rumors, dodged questions, and moved on with their separate careers. But now, one confession changed everything. Ken wasn't talking about just any voice, he was talking about her. Social media erupted within minutes of the interview airing. Clips were shared millions of times, captions like "He still loves her" and "This is the truth we've been waiting for" flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Fans around the world, from Turkey to Italy to Spain, connected with his pain. Hearing her voice, Ken continued, "Was like being taken back to nights we spent on set, laughing at nothing, sharing secrets, believing we had all the time in the world. But now those memories, they're like glass. Beautiful, but sharp enough to cut me every time I touch them." He exhaled deeply, his hands almost shaking. This wasn't the confident star people had seen at premieres and red carpets. This was the vulnerable man behind the image, exposing a wound that had never really healed. The interviewer asked softly, "So, what did you feel in that exact moment?" Can's eyes glistened as he whispered, "I felt like I wanted to stop time. To hold on to her voice forever. But at the same time, I knew it was too late. And that broke me." Viewers watching from their homes described the moment as heartbreaking. Some said they had goosebumps, others admitted they cried alongside him. It wasn't just an interview anymore, it was a confession of love, regret, and pain that touched millions. As the cameras kept rolling, the atmosphere in the studio grew heavier. The interviewer didn't interrupt anymore, there was no need. Can's words were carrying the weight of years, and every silence between his sentences was just as powerful as the words themselves. He finally lifted his head, looking straight ahead, almost as if speaking directly to her through the lens. "Do you know what the hardest part is?" he asked quietly, his voice breaking. "It's knowing that I never said the things I should have said. That I let pride, fear, and circumstances get in the way. And now, when I hear her voice again, all I can think about is what I lost because of my silence." The audience watching at home could feel the sincerity. Fans who had followed their journey from the beginning knew that this wasn't just about nostalgia, it was about regret. The kind of regret that doesn't fade, no matter how much success or fame you achieve. Ken had it all: wealth, recognition, adoration from millions. But in that moment, he was stripped of everything, left only with the memory of one woman's voice that still had the power to undo him completely. Online, the reaction reached another level. "This is the real Ken Yaman," one fan tweeted. "Not the actor, not the star, but the man who loved and lost." Others wrote long threads dissecting his every word, comparing past interviews, behind-the-scenes clips, and even old photos where his smile seemed just a little softer when she was by his side. For many, this was the confirmation they had always suspected. The connection between Ken and Demet wasn't just fiction, it was something real, something that left an unhealed scar. Ken's hands trembled slightly as he rubbed his eyes, fighting back tears. "I thought I was strong enough to move on," he admitted, his voice barely audible. But strength means nothing when one sound, one memory, can bring you to your knees. He paused, swallowed hard, and then added, "Her voice reminded me of who I was when I was happiest, and of everything I'll never get back." The confession was devastating. Even the interviewer, usually composed and professional, seemed visibly moved. She whispered, "Do you still?" But before finishing, she stopped, realizing the question might be too much. Ken gave a faint, bittersweet smile. "Some feelings never die," he replied, his words hanging in the air like a haunting truth. The air in the studio was thick with emotion, but Ken didn't stop. It was as if years of silence had finally broken open, and now the words were flowing out faster than he could contain them. "People always see me smiling on red carpets, posing for cameras, giving interviews where everything seems perfect," he said, shaking his head. "But what they don't see is what happens when I'm alone. The nights when I hear her laughter in my mind, the echoes of conversations we had long ago. When I heard her voice again, it was like being pulled back into that time, against my will." He leaned back, pressing his hand against his chest as if to steady his heartbeat. "It wasn't just a memory, it was a storm. And it tore me apart." Fans who watched described this moment as almost unbearable. Seeing someone so admired, so seemingly untouchable, admit to such pain struck a chord with everyone who had ever loved and lost. Across social media, comments flooded in. "This is the most real interview I've ever seen, I can't believe he's finally saying it out loud, and this proves everything we suspected." For many, it was a bittersweet vindication. They had always felt the chemistry between Ken and Demet was more than acting, and now, Ken himself was bearing the truth in the most heartbreaking way. The interviewer, speaking softly, asked, "If you could go back, what would you do differently?" Ken's expression changed. His eyes, already glistening, filled with even more emotion. "Everything," he whispered. "I would have picked up the phone. I would have answered when she called. I would have told her the words I was too afraid to say. Because now, I live with the silence I created." Those words hit like thunder. Fans froze. Was this the call everyone had speculated about? The call that Demet once hinted at, the one that never got an answer? The pieces began to fit together, and suddenly, this was no longer just a confession, it was a revelation. The revelation about the call changed everything. For years, fans had whispered about it, rumors of a late-night attempt to reach him, of words left unsaid, of silence that cut deeper than any argument ever could. And now, here was Ken, finally admitting it in his own words. His voice grew softer, almost like he was speaking only to her, forgetting that millions were listening. "That one call, it could have changed everything. But I didn't pick up. I told myself I was too busy, too tired, too distracted. The truth? I was scared. Scared of what I would hear, scared of the feelings I couldn't control. And that choice, I regret it every single day." The studio fell into complete silence. You could almost hear his heartbeat through the microphone. Fans watching at home felt a chill. It was the kind of raw honesty rarely seen from a star who had built a career on being untouchable. Tears welled up in his eyes, and for a moment he didn't even try to hide them. When I heard her voice again, years later, he continued, all of that regret came crashing down. I wanted to scream, to beg for another chance, but all I could do was sit there, paralyzed, realizing I had lost something that can never be replaced. Online, the reactions reached a fever pitch. Hashtags with both their names trended worldwide. Fans in Turkey, Italy, Germany, and even the US united in their heartbreak, posting messages like "This is the confession we've waited for" and "How can one voice still break him like this?" Old clips resurfaced, behind-the-scenes moments, interviews, candid videos of them laughing together. Every smile, every glance was now reanalyzed through the lens of his confession. People weren't just watching an interview anymore, they were piecing together a love story that had always been hiding in plain sight. And at the center of it stood Can, a man with everything, admitting that despite the fame, despite the success, he was still haunted by the one thing he couldn't get back: her voice, her presence, her love. By the time the interview reached its closing moments, it no longer felt like a typical Q&A. It felt like a confession booth, a place where Yaman had finally unburdened his soul in front of millions. His final words weren't polished or carefully crafted, they were raw, almost trembling, filled with years of emotion he could no longer hold back. "I've built a career, I've traveled the world, I've met incredible people. But nothing," he said, pressing a hand against his chest, "nothing has ever filled the emptiness that came from losing her." And when I heard her voice again, I realized that emptiness is still there. Stronger than ever. The interviewer, visibly moved, tried to wrap things up, but Can interrupted softly, as if he needed one last chance to be heard. "I don't know if she'll ever hear this," he whispered, his eyes glassy, "but if she does, I want her to know. I never stopped caring. Not for a single day." That sentence hung in the air like a final act, a closing curtain to a story that millions had followed from afar. For fans, it was more than enough to ignite endless discussions. Was this his way of reaching out after years of silence? Was this a message meant directly for Demet? Or was it simply a man finally finding the courage to admit the truth that had been burning inside him all along? Across the world, people replayed that final moment again and again, searching for every detail: his trembling hands, the crack in his voice, the way he paused before saying "I never stopped caring." Every frame became part of the legend. In the days that followed, newspapers, magazines, and social media platforms couldn't stop talking about it. Headlines screamed about Can's emotional breakdown, about the love story that refused to die, about the confession that shook fans everywhere. But behind all the noise, one thing was clear: this wasn't just about fame, or gossip, or speculation. This was about two people whose lives had been intertwined in ways no one fully understood. And for Can, hearing her voice again was like reopening the most painful yet beautiful chapter of his life. The chapter he could never forget, and never truly close. As the cameras finally stopped rolling, Can sat in silence, tears drying on his face. He wasn't the star anymore, not in that moment. He was just a man who had loved, lost, and admitted the one truth that would follow him forever: sometimes, one voice is enough to break you, because it reminds you of the love you'll never stop carrying.